Thank you for being here.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ellie. And Shelley, thank you for inviting me to be here today. And thank you everyone on the call for joining me. I do have several years of experience working on this AmeriCorps grant. And so I feel capable of talking about AmeriCorps for you all, but it is a big topic. So I just kind of want to preface my talk with that. There's a lot of programming that individual organizations can do. And so I'm going to try to cover as much as I can, but we will have time for questions at the end. And of course, you're always welcome to follow up with me. I will also leave contacts for our service commission folks at the end as well, in case you have any questions for them. So here we go. I can get there we go. So Ellie kind of did all of my introduction that I was going to share with you today, but I'll kind of elaborate on a little bit of it. So I started with Bur Oak in 2019, and that was our first AmeriCorps program year. So I jumped in right after, we started the program in the fall. So I've worked with this particular program since its inception, which is really exciting because we've come a long way since then. Before I joined Bur Oak, I worked for a few Iowa newspapers. So that's where my communications background came into play. That was a really exciting job. Learned a lot, kind of learned how to do everything very quickly and on the ground. And it was a great opportunity. Before that, I also did serve as an AmeriCorps member in the Quad Cities. And so in that role, I spent 2 years doing a lot of health and safety education for kids in the Quad Cities. So what that boiled down to was a lot of CPR, a lot of first aid, and also teaching the littlest kids about washing their hands and staying germ-free. And so it was a really great experience. And I think that definitely influenced me in continuing to seek out opportunities to serve my community. And I was so lucky to find this position with Bur Oak. For those of you that don't know about Bur Oak Land Trust, the organization has been in Johnson County since 1978. It was established by a group of passionate environmental advocates who saw the need for an organization to quickly move to protect land. And so it was started kind of by one woman. She gathered the troops together and they formed this land trust. Currently, we own 12 preserves that most of them are open to the public year round. We also hold 17 conservation easements in Eastern Iowa, which is where we primarily serve. We are headed into our 5th year of AmeriCorps. And so this September, when we start our program, that will be 5 years. And it's really exciting. We've learned a lot in the last several years about AmeriCorps, and I'm excited to be able to share that with you all today. So a quick overview of what topics we're going to go over today. We have our learning objectives, some basics about AmeriCorps, differences in AmeriCorps programs that you should think about for your organization. Unallowable activities for members is always important to keep in mind. Budgeting, funding for that budget, navigating the AmeriCorps system, and then some benefits and challenges that we've seen through our experience. All right, so to get started, I think we have some different organizations represented just based on responses in the chat, so that's great. Another question I have is, how many of you are familiar with AmeriCorps? If there's a raising hand option or just say yes or no in the chat, that would be great. Excellent. I got a couple hands. And then just kind of think about what your experience is. And you can share in the chat if you'd like, but if that's kind of more on the outside, maybe you've heard of AmeriCorps, but you don't really have any experience with it. Or if you've been involved with AmeriCorps yourself, or maybe you've had experience working with an organization that does have an AmeriCorps program. So we've got someone who served. Excellent. Someone who knows very little. Great. I'm glad you're here. Excellent. So experience with others who served. Great. Well, AmeriCorps has their explanation of what AmeriCorps is. And so that is works with local and national partners to tap the power of the American people to tackle our country's most pressing challenges. So what does that really mean? That basically boils down to AmeriCorps, the federal agency, awards federal dollars to programs within nonprofits, faith-based groups, schools, local agencies, and also state and local governments across the country in order to meet critical needs in those communities. AmeriCorps is a program to inspire national and local service, to increase more civic engagement. So our objectives today are how to fund AmeriCorps positions with a small operational budget, ways that you can utilize AmeriCorps to increase capacity, which is one of the big areas that AmeriCorps provides benefits, and one of the main purposes for AmeriCorps is to increase capacity for effectively meeting needs in communities. And then the last one is kind of tips for navigating the AmeriCorps system. So if any of you have dealt with federal grants before, you may know that there's a lot of reporting, programs that you have to be aware of, online applications that you have to know the ins and outs of. There's a lot of things to consider when kind of going for a program like this. And so I'll try to give you an overview as best I can. So when you think about AmeriCorps for your organization, it's really important to think about the needs that your organization has. So think about the ways that your organization serves the community and how those services could be increased, how you could enhance the services that you provide. Understanding exactly how and what you need and how you're going to get there are crucial to constructing a program design. So a couple questions that you'll want to answer is, how could AmeriCorps members expand a service or address an unmet need? How many members would you need to provide or expand those services? And how long would those members need to do those services? In AmeriCorps, there are different position types. So members can serve a full year term, which means they start with our members, they start in September and they end in August. So that would be a full year term. There are other position types where members could serve half-time. So just like the position description says, they would serve about half of those hours. So they would not need to be in the full year term to serve all of those hours. There's a lot of different options for position types. So it just kind of depends on what you feel would be appropriate for your organization. Some other questions to ask is, how will your organization measure the impact that these AmeriCorps members have on the services they provide or the outreach that they have in the community? And then how will your organization raise funds for the AmeriCorps program? With answers to those questions, then you can decide kind of what kind of AmeriCorps grant would be appropriate to pursue. AmeriCorps has 3 different branches. So there's VISTA, that is a service kind of focused on alleviating poverty for the most part. There's NCCC, which stands for National Civilian Community Members. I can't remember the last C, but those are more regional project-based services, a lot of environmental projects, disaster response, and FEMA Corps. And then there's state and national, which is the largest of the 3 branches, and they have a variety of programs nationwide. So to kind of get a better understanding of how everything flows here, starting with AmeriCorps, the agency, kind of at the top, it breaks down into who administers different programs throughout the program. So we have programs that are administered by the headquarters at the federal level, and then we have programs that are administered by state commissions. So for our state, we have Volunteer Iowa. They are based out of Des Moines, and they are responsible for all of the AmeriCorps programming across the state, as well as a lot of volunteer engagement and opportunities. So we are housed as our state and national program under the Volunteer Iowa Commission. So there's kind of like a 3-step process for our AmeriCorps grant. On this map, you can see where we have programs in Iowa, which is all over the state and all of the counties. There are different kinds of programs represented. So here in Johnson County, I mean, we have the state and national programs represented, VISTA represented, we have seniors program represented. So all kinds of AmeriCorps opportunities are in Johnson County, and there's a lot of ways for your organization to kind of fit in with what is happening already in the county with AmeriCorps. For the state and national branch, programs focused on community needs, primarily around education, economic opportunities, disaster response, environmental stewardship, which is what we do at Bur Oak Land Trust, healthy futures, and then veterans services. Some examples of those are improving school readiness of pre-K students to training individuals in disaster response. And so actually this photo is one of our AmeriCorps members training someone how to use chainsaws as part of our Chainsaw Academy. And that was something that we developed as a response to the derecho, when we saw a lot of individuals using chainsaws unsafely. And so this was a way that we could enhance our programming through AmeriCorps. The way that AmeriCorps state and national grants can increase capacity is to allow your organizations to address community needs by providing resources. So the AmeriCorps agency awards funding in order to improve and enhance the programs that already exist, as well as create new programming that are reaching unmet needs. And so any underserved communities that exist in our area, AmeriCorps funds can really help with designing projects around those needs. Members are able to do outreach and education to raise awareness for your organization. An example of kind of more of the direct service that they could do versus capacity building is they can support an after-school program. So they could, you know, help with the kids in the after-school program, providing them activities, leading activities, things like that. But the way that they build capacity is to do more outreach, bringing in resources to really help support the activities being done at the site. To increase the capacity of the program, but also increase the benefits of the program, especially for those kids. Members can also receive training that makes programming more effective. So for our case, we had a number of volunteer stewards that would help with land management on our lands. Those volunteers were available in a limited capacity. So they probably spent about 2,000 hours per year treating the land. With our AmeriCorps team now, they are professionally trained and they spend around 15,000 hours per year treating the land. We recently also had a testimonial from one of our host sites, which is an organization that is housed under our AmeriCorps program. They're a partner to us. That host site said that the one full-time AmeriCorps member that they had in the program increased their ability to offer programs by 40%, which is a huge number. You know, that's really the example of increasing capacity that we want to see. And that's really the way that AmeriCorps is designed to fulfill a lot of those needs. So who can serve in AmeriCorps? There are kind of three things that need to fall into place before members can join a program. And so the first thing is citizenship. So AmeriCorps was designed to be a civic engagement opportunity. And so it is important that individuals involved in AmeriCorps are citizens. They can have several statuses, but it's really those three things. They have to have one of those three things in order to meet that citizenship requirement. AmeriCorps members have to be at least 17 when they start in their program, but there isn't an upper age limit. So AmeriCorps members could be any age above 17 to serve. We actually just had an individual who is in his 70s serve as a steward with us, kind of this last part of the service year. And so it was a really great opportunity to have him involved with individuals who are kind of in their early 20s, to have different perspectives on the way that land management is done, but also to kind of build those relationships with different age groups through the AmeriCorps service. The third step is a background check. So members have to complete a 3-part background check to have to perform a 3-part background check against the National Sex Offender Registry, and then to check for any convictions in their past that would prevent them from serving with AmeriCorps. For our program, so over the last 4 years, we've had 52 members enrolled in our program. They've served over 49,000 service hours, and those numbers are just from September 2019 to April of this year. So we've had members serving since then. They wrap up this week, but since then, so they've served even more hours than that. And that's all focused on our main AmeriCorps program goals, which are to improve habitat and remove invasive species. And so those are the things that they serve. Those are the needs that they serve while they're serving with us. And we've seen a drastic increase in the amount of quality land management being done since they've been a part of our organization. We also have 5 host site partners over the last few years. And those are organizations that have members, but they don't hold the grant. So that's a little bit different than what we do, which is holding the grant, and we kind of have our own set of members. They're almost like an offshoot to us, a partnership to us, and they have their own members. And I'll explain more about host sites in just a little bit. We've also had multiple agency partners to provide training and professional development opportunities to our members. And these are all things that you should consider when thinking about how you want to incorporate AmeriCorps into your program, because it's not only about what AmeriCorps members can do for your organization, it's kind of like what they also get out of it in return. Members do receive other benefits that I'll touch on in just a little bit, but it's kind of like building that experience for them is also very important, and something that we've learned to kind of fine tune over the last few years. We've incorporated different training opportunities for those members, such as advanced chainsaw training, disaster response training, drone training, so they can fly the drones to help us with land management projects, and different things like that. So that's another key topic to think about, is kind of how would you also develop a good experience for your members. For the makeup of our members, this layout has kind of worked for us for the past couple of years. So we've brought in 7 full-time members, which means that we have 7 individuals serving the entire program year with us. We have 1 3/4 time member, so they don't serve quite as many hours. We've had members at 2 host sites, and then we've brought in summer members later in the year to help with some summer projects. And so when you're thinking about kind of bringing in members, it's when is the best time to recruit for those members? If they're serving full time, when do you need them to start? When would you like them to be done with their service? How many hours a week do you foresee them serving with you? If there's a busier time of year, would it make more sense to have members in more of a limited service term with you? All things to consider, because there's a lot of different configurations with AmeriCorps members. Once you kind of decide what your members, what you want them to do with your program, it's important to remember that there are some things that AmeriCorps members cannot do. Because it is a federal program, there are some stipulations about what members cannot do. Two of the biggest things are called non-duplication and non-displacement. And so what those mean are AmeriCorps members cannot take the place of community resources that already exist. So you couldn't start a new AmeriCorps program that's replicating something that already exists organically in the community. The other thing is non-displacement, and that's programs cannot reduce or eliminate staff hours, wages, or benefits because of AmeriCorps. So an organization couldn't, limit the staff that they have or get rid of staff to replace them with AmeriCorps members. Not allowed. AmeriCorps isn't supposed to be a long-term employment opportunity for individuals. It's supposed to be more of a shorter term civic engagement booster, where people can gain experience, they gain some benefits, but ultimately it's to serve the community and then go on to that next level, either a career or school or something like that. So here's a little test about non-duplication and non-displacement. I have an example here. Members are serving as lunchroom, playground monitors, or assisting with bus duty for school-based programs. These are unallowable activities, and I want you to answer in the chat why you think those would be unallowable. Already exist. Good. Yep, reducing the hours of staff or replacing the hours of staff. Excellent. So yeah, members cannot serve or step in for classroom teachers or other staff in those functions. These things would fall under non-duplication and non-displacement, and those serving duties also would likely not support the approved goals of the program, which would be increased educational performance. So AmeriCorps members can serve in a lot of functions, but they cannot duplicate or displace any staff members or tasks that are already being done. Some additional unallowable activities, fundraising. Fundraising for an organization's operating budget is unallowable, or benefiting for-profit entities is also unallowable. Members cannot participate in any political activities, including voter registration, while they're serving in AmeriCorps, like as an AmeriCorps member. They also cannot do any religious instruction or provide abortion services. They also can't do any activities that fall outside the scope of the goals of the program. So anything that's really a mission drift activity, including like cleaning activities at a site, those really wouldn't benefit the goals of the program. And they also would be things that would be done whether or not AmeriCorps was serving at the organization. So those types of activities are also unallowable. Fundraising, I put a little asterisk here because members can fundraise for specific things. So they can fundraise for a particular project that they are working on. as a part of their service term. But again, that fundraising, it's kind of a gray area. That fundraising cannot benefit that organization. It has to only go back into the AmeriCorps program. So now you have the activities down, you kind of know what kinds of members you want to bring into your organization. It's time to look at the budget. So budgeting is, I mean, it's a really important part of the program, but it's also really dependent upon the types of members that you choose to bring into the program. Those will directly match your costs. Those will be the bulk of your program budget. So for a state and national operating grant, there are 3 kind of levels of budgets. So for the full operating grant, so say that your organization is going to apply for your own grant, you're going to meet all of the requirements of that grant, you're going to cover all of the costs yourself. This would be the most expensive option for your organization. For programs in Iowa, there's a minimum of 10 MSYs, so member service years, per operating grant. So a member service year is that full-time, half-time position type. Those are the service years. So your operating grant, the cost of that will depend on your total requested budget for the entire term, divided by the member service years that you're bringing on. So if you had, say, a $266,000 budget and you wanted to bring on 20 full-time AmeriCorps members or 20 MSY, your cost per MSY would be about $13,300 per individual. It would be about the same per MSY if you brought in 40 half-time members. So the member position type makes a big difference in what type of program you're trying to put together. The full operating grant with host sites is more of a moderate cost to your program. So you can start the program, you can figure out what members you want to have, but then you bring in those partners to assign some of those MSYs to. So you're bringing in those partners to essentially have them take members and then cover the costs of those members. So that's how you can kind of pull your budget down a little bit. The least cost of the program would be serving as a host site only. So on the flip side, we have partners that only need 1 member or 2 members for a certain amount of time. And so they're able to work into their budget the costs associated for that member, and then everything else kind of comes out of the program budget. And so that can really help organizations who maybe want to see what a member program would be like before they really invest all of the resources and time and money into having their own grant or adding more members to their host site. Other costs to consider when you're thinking about a budget, all members typically receive a living allowance. So that's a monthly payment that they receive. That can be minimal for full-time members. It has to be a minimum of just over $12,000. So it's really not that much at minimum. They also, member costs include FICA payments, workers' comp, and healthcare, especially for full-time members. They are eligible for health insurance benefits. And so factoring those costs into your budget. There are also program costs. So if you're having staff on the grant, which you should have a staff member on the grant to manage member files, to apply for the grant, to deal with financial management of the grant. But their compensation and benefits are also part of the program costs. travel for required trainings and conferences hosted by Volunteer Iowa and CNCS, the federal organization. Any supplies, any training for members and staff, members to do their service and staff for like AmeriCorps training. Member gear, we provide t-shirts and things like that for our members that have the AmeriCorps logo on them. Things like that, any consultants for the program, and then other operating costs, including background checks, member bonuses, or management of the grant at the state level. So there are some administrative costs there. Additional administrative costs, there's a % of the budget that goes toward management of the grant at the federal level. So maintaining paperwork and systems and things like that in order to award all of the grant funds, a percentage of your budget goes to pay for those costs. So funding for that budget, AmeriCorps grants do receive partial federal funding to support the projects and the programs of AmeriCorps. Organizations do have to contribute a % of the total budget as match funding for the project. In general, first-year programs that run an operating grant are responsible for 24% of the total budget for the first 3 program years. It does increase after those first 3 years. Programs can also enter a competitive funding pool, and there are different requirements for that route as well. Funding through the program is for AmeriCorps program expenses only and cannot be used for general operating expenses. To meet the financial requirement, organizations have to identify either federal, state, local, and or private sector funds for the match based on requirements of the grant. I know for our grant, we are not able to have any federal grants covering our match, but I think it does depend on which type of AmeriCorps program you're looking at. There could be other opportunities at the federal level for match funding. Match can include cash or in-kind sources. And then, like I said earlier, members may fundraise for specific projects that they are working on that can help with funding the projects of that position. So navigating the system of AmeriCorps. In general, there are some key tips that I would have for entering any kind of AmeriCorps opportunity. So whether that's just at the host site level, or if you are considering having an operating grant, it's always important to have intention with what you want to do with that program. So having a clear program design and plan to incorporate those members into your organization is essential to success of that program. There will be some trial and error, especially with anything. The first time you do it, you're going to learn what works best, what didn't work so well, but knowing what outcomes you're looking for and that you'll be able to measure each term will ensure longevity of the program, and you'll just have greater success overall with member satisfaction, member retention. It's just always important to have a clear design for your program going into it. Another important tip is to be organized. For any of you who have worked on grants of any kind, but especially federal grants, there's a lot of things to keep track of, a lot of paperwork, a lot of document retention, a lot of programs that you have to use. So it's important to have a specific individual who will kind of keep track of all of those requirements of the grant. A program director is ideally the person for that role. They complete all of the grant applications, monitor deadlines, complete all of the reports. Of course, there are other individuals who can contribute to these things, but in general, you want to have one person who's kind of responsible for overseeing all of these things. Setting up a system to organize all the documents and files at the start of your AmeriCorps term is the best way to stay on top of all of the reporting that happens throughout the year. Another important thing is to ask questions. So at the state level, Volunteer Iowa is our state commission. They have all of the answers to, working within AmeriCorps grants. They are really valuable resources, and they want AmeriCorps programs to succeed in the state. And so they send out regular communications to make sure that programs are not only in compliance with grant requirements, but that they're also having program success. Because again, it benefits them to have many AmeriCorps programs to show the success of the system in the state. It's also important to identify support staff for the grant. So in addition to your program director, who at your organization can provide support to members. Here we have a land steward that supervises our members, monitors their timesheets and things like that. So that individual helps me make sure that the program is running as it should. And then also who will manage the financial elements of your program. So we also have our executive director monitors the financials for the grant. And then we also have an accountant who helps manage all of those money issues. It's really important to have as much support staff as you can. And I know with, nonprofits, we all wear multiple hats. But it is good to identify who is kind of going to be responsible for each of those roles in supporting the grant. Some other tips: save bookmarks. That's really one thing that has helped me with all of the reporting and timekeeping and keeping track of all of the systems that they use with the AmeriCorps grants. Bookmarks, and then saving all passwords. That would be just one of my biggest tips, is just saving all that information in a place that's ready to find, easy to access, because there are a lot of things to keep track of. The other thing is working early. So start collecting reporting data and information as early as you can and regularly. This is especially important if you get into the grant cycle where you're in an operating grant and you're continuing year over year. Oftentimes you'll be working on multiple grant cycles at the same time. And so it's good to work early on collecting that data so that you can get everything done in a timely manner. Benefits of the program. So we have seen a lot of benefits with this program, and it's one of the main reasons why we keep continuing. We've seen increased number of hours spent improving the land. So we've directly seen improvements to the performance measures and the goals that we set out each year. All of the projects are now completed by trained professionals. All of our AmeriCorps members receive professional level training in order to go out and do a variety of land management projects, and it shows. I mean, the land itself has seen advanced improvement in certain areas. We have a specific preserve called Belgium Grove, and out there it was inundated with an invasive species called reed canary grass. Since our members have been out there doing prescribed fire year after year, they've been out there managing the area. Now we're starting to see that reed canary grass dying back and more native species coming out and improving the habitat in that area. That's exactly the thing that we want to see. And it would just be really difficult to get there without the AmeriCorps program. The program also increases our connection to the community through a variety of events and partnerships. We're also able to train kind of a new group of conservation leaders, which I think is a dire need, kind of as we're thinking about climate change, as we're thinking about, saving more green space, making the world kind of a better place to go out and visit, getting more people outside, getting more people in tune with the environment. We want to have those confident conservation leaders going into the field, and we're able to help do that. We also had a great success story. We had an AmeriCorps member named Sarah Longer who served 3 terms with us. And then we were able to bring her on as our newest land steward. And it's been a really great continuation of everything that she learned throughout her AmeriCorps experience, leadership skills, land management skills, project management skills, and now she's providing all those benefits as a member of our staff. And it's just a really great thing that we've been able to do. There are challenges to the AmeriCorps program, however, as with any program. I would say some of the biggest ones are building the program out and learning the ropes of AmeriCorps. It can be daunting. There's a lot of things to consider. But fortunately, through Volunteer Iowa, there are a lot of individuals there to help work through a lot of those issues. I would encourage anyone who's interested or think they might be a good fit for an AmeriCorps program to reach out to the commission, talk through what you think your program design would be and how you think that AmeriCorps could best fit your needs. Another challenge is ensuring compliance from the AmeriCorps members, making sure that their timesheets are submitted, making sure that they're doing the tasks that they set out to do, making sure that they're meeting their hours requirements, and then also ensuring compliance from any host sites that you work with. Keeping up with reporting is challenging. There's a lot of reports due, a lot of information that Volunteer Iowa collects. Again, they are very supportive at Volunteer Iowa. They send out a lot of updates and calendars and deadlines and things like that to keep everyone on track. But it is just, for the first time, it can be challenging to kind of keep track of all those things and make sure that all the reporting is getting done. Recruitment can be challenging. It's been especially challenging these last few years for us. I know recruitment for, jobs and things like that is difficult as well. Recruiting is a full-time task. It's not something that happens just one time of year. It's kind of an over the course of a year project. And so that can be a little challenging. Unexpended funds at the end of the term are challenging. Unexpended funds for us have, so any funds that were unspent from our grant at the end of the term are usually because we weren't able to recruit a specific position. That's when we've had those unexpended funds. So identifying the number of members that you need and how you're going to get those people in those positions is really important before you start as well. Learning the claims and financial reporting processes, and then adjusting your accounting system to work with AmeriCorps. That was another big challenge for our financial team. It's just something to note and consider before you start getting involved in any AmeriCorps things, kind of like setting yourself up for success before you start. So that is my presentation. I do have contact information here for the Service Commission. I also have my contact information there on the bottom, my email. So if you have any questions after today, I know it's a lot of information. Please feel free to reach out to me or anyone at Volunteer Iowa with any questions you have.